Thank you everyone for being here today. And I'd like to welcome Jen to the show. Jen is from Colorado and her pronouns are she, her. Jen, thank you so much for joining the show, reaching out to be on the show. I'm incredibly humbled to chat with you and learn more about your story. How are you doing today?
I am doing good. I'm very excited to be on with you and to just get a chance to tell my story.
Wonderful, wonderful. A little bit outside of endo, tell us a little bit about yourself. I said you live in Colorado. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to add?
So I live in Colorado. It's me and my husband and my two dogs who are my babies, Sierra and Copper. So no kids, but we have dogs and they get spoiled rotten. I am originally an East Coaster. So I was born and raised in New York, then moved to New Jersey where I met my husband. I fell in love with Colorado on a ski trip out here and said, we're moving there. So we tried and we got to move here. We made it work a few years into getting married, and we've been here for 6.5 years. I love it. It will be hard to get me to ever leave the state, to be perfectly honest. We love skiing, we love hiking, we love everything outdoors here. People joke, they're like, who are you now? And I'm like, I don't know. I do all these outdoor things. So,
I
yeah.
love it. Oh my gosh. I love Colorado as well and the outdoors. So I understand that. It's so healing too. There's just something about
It
the
is.
mountains that
It's just
feels
like
good.
nature. It resets you. It
Well,
makes you feel good.
and as someone coming from the East Coast, and I like to say I'm like a blend between Midwest and East Coast being in Detroit, it's just a slower lifestyle. It really is.
Oh
Like,
my God. So different.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love it. Like
Yeah.
everybody's just like, their focus is like, let's get outside, let's do all these
Yeah.
things. So, well, that is lovely. And good for you for getting out there and doing what you love. So let's talk a little bit about endo. I know, you have an extensive history and we're going to jump right into the beginning. So when did you start to maybe feel signs or symptoms, or maybe no symptoms at all?
Yeah. I have to say, I probably have never met anyone else with this one part of my story. I did not get my period until I was 16 years old. Like to the point where it had become a real concern. All of my
Sure.
friends had their period like 12, 13, 14. I remember my mom took me to the OBGYN and was like, she hasn't gotten it. And they were like, we want to do an exam. And I was like, you're not going anywhere near down there. Like,
Yeah.
no, nope, get away from me. So they were like, okay, we'll go a little bit longer, but if you don't get your period soon, we have to check. And so I was like, just like, let me get my period. And I will never forget. The reason I think about this is because from where I start to where I go, I was at my friend's house at a sleepover. I'm 16. I wake up, I go to the bathroom, and I've gotten my period. It is the most exciting moment. I think like, yes, it happened. I remember racing to the kitchen, calling my mom, "Mom, I got my period." Like just thinking like this is such a good thing, right? That's what like my head was at like, yeah, like I'm normal. I got my period. I had no idea at that moment my life was about to completely explode. And I think about that like that memory all the time and like how it went from such a high like there's nothing wrong with me to oh my god, like what just happened?
Yeah.
And I think so it wasn't actually my period itself that was the problem to start with. It was my hormones. So I went off the deep end within like 30 seconds. Like we joke, I became this other person my junior year of high school. The anxiety and depression were just instant. And we had no idea, obviously, at the time it had anything to do with endo, right? But
Of course.
like everyone was like, you're a teenager, these are hormones. It's one of the things that haunts me the most now about other teenagers, like getting that out there. Like, it's not normal, guys,
No.
to be okay one second and then the next second to be severely depressed, to have like severe anxiety attacks. Like, all of a sudden, I would have like mood swings that like fights with my parents that like I was a good kid. Like I started skipping classes, I started flunking classes. Like what I the only thing I could explain as like I just couldn't handle anything. One second I could, and the next second I couldn't. And then the other sign something was wrong for me was my stomach. So I actually had the bowel symptoms really early on. Like sitting in class, like freaking out, like, what am I gonna do? I have to go to the bathroom. do I raise my hand? And that would stir up these anxiety attacks, which
Of course. Of
resulted
course.
in skipping classes and this very quick downward spiral.
Yeah. Yes. And that
So it really,
happened like almost immediately, like first cycle. And then it was like
yeah,
things started, like the
it
switch
just it just kind of
flipped.
starts like
Yeah.
going
Going.
downhill
Mhm.
emotionally. The stomach things kept getting worse and worse to the point where I had to know where a bathroom was at all times. I didn't want to get in the car with people I wasn't comfortable with because A, you're 16, like you're not going to be like, I have to go to the bathroom really bad. Like, who wants to talk about that?
For sure. For sure. High
like,
school's already hard enough. Like
like,
adding this layer on. Yeah.
right. Like
100%.
that's so like I became very um like I would only hang out with certain people or get in the car with certain people. I would only go certain places. And this basically went on junior and senior year. My periods were painful,
Mhm.
but I never had like the heavy bleeding. Just really bad like cramps and like the stomach issues would get worse
Worse during that time. But the stomach issues were all the time. It's just when you were on your
all the time.
cycle, they were
It was way
probably
worse.
off the
Then
chart.
it was like, I'm not even leaving the house. Forget
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not risking being more than 2 feet from the bathroom kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Understood. Oh,
Um,
so sorry.
yeah, so I mean,
It's hard.
we thought nothing of it. Like
Of
there's
course.
no like oh, and by the way, this is 1999. So I better, I'm just
Right.
going to set that. Endometriosis is not like
No,
we're we're not as far 22 years later, but we're really like not talking about it back then.
no, the word wasn't even like in circulation. I
Who's
mean,
heard of
that's
it?
a similar time when I was starting to go through things. Yeah, that word was never mentioned to me. And I
Right.
was like laying on the floor every month and, that was
In
normal.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the fetal position was very normal back then, right? Like even my
Yes.
stomach issues, I would be in the fetal, and I just was like, everyone must do this, right?
Same.
Turns
Yeah.
out that's not true.
It's not true. Yes.
So I went to college, and just we just thought this was normal. And then there's this part of you that's thinking like, it's hormones. I'm gonna grow out of this. It's high school, whatever. I'm gonna go to college. It's gonna be great. I moved to Florida. I go to school down there, and my first semester did not go well. I got Bell's palsy, which is actually I woke up with half of my face paralyzed,
Oh my goodness.
not helping the
No,
situation that's already
no.
spiraling. So after that, the depression gets worse. So by my second semester of college, I was on the high school track, skipping,
Mhm.
flunking, lying to my parents. I'll be honest, I was using drinking as a way to cope.
Sure.
And finally, I just like write an email in the middle of the night because that's the only time I get courage. I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm in trouble. You got to come get me. Um,
Good
so
for
my parents
you.
came. Yeah, I
That,
mean,
I mean, to have the courage to, I mean, that's a
it wasn't
lot.
easy,
No, it's
right?
very challenging, especially that age, right? You're like 19.
Yeah, it turns out things were so bad. My college roommate and best friend at the time had already started calling my mom to let her know things were bad. So it was coming no matter what. But
Yeah.
I went home. I look at it as a blessing in disguise because that summer I had my first ruptured cyst. I wake up in the middle of the night in just the worst pain of my life, and I'm spotting, and I'm like, what is happening? And I get my parents up at like 2 in the morning, and we didn't know what to do. So we ended up just sort of I get in bed with them. They gave me some pain meds, and we just kind of like laid there, and they're just like, it's going to be okay. I eventually slept through it. Wake up
Yep.
the next day, bleeding for the next few days, and I don't have my period. I'm like, I don't know what this is.
Right.
Okay. We go to the OBGYN, and she's like, it's probably a ruptured cyst, but let's just see what happens. Okay. I think like a month or two goes by. I have another ruptured cyst.
Mm,
Um, we go back to the OBGYN. Now we know something's wrong.
yeah.
This is where my story is a little bit different. She says, I would like to do a laparoscopy. I think you have endometriosis.
Wow. I have full chills right now. Like,
2001, my OBGYN says, I think you have endometriosis. Like, this is not the path. I mean,
right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
8 to 10 years of diagnosis. Like, she says it right away. I mean, I am so thankful to her to this day.
Yes.
The fact that she
Yes.
knew about this disease
Yes.
and said it and was
Yeah.
like, let's get you into surgery.
Yes.
That's, I always look at that, I'm like, great, that part goes well, right?
Right.
The problem is nothing's known about this disease back then.
Right.
I go
Or if
to, I'm
it
like,
was like,
it's
it
not
was
out
like
there.
birth control and deal with it. I mean, here's some, they always used to give me naproxen sodium. What is that? Like a lead
Oh
or
my
what?
God.
It doesn't even
Like
do
just
anything. It doesn't even
jars
work.
and jars of naproxen. I will say, like, they did give me a lot of hydrocodone.
Oh, I
I
don't think
am
I got that, but
I'm really grateful I wasn't the person who got addicted. Like, I can see
for
how
sure.
people can go down that path. I hated it from
Yeah.
the second I took it. I hated the way it made me feel.
Yeah.
It like barely did anything for the pain, and I just
Right.
felt gross. And so I
Yeah.
was like, nope, nope, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, worst case scenario, I'll use it, but like not for me. So we did a laparoscopy in 2002. And I was diagnosed with endometriosis. And so I guess, like, on the one hand, you're like, okay, I have this diagnosis.
At this point, too, I mean, it's like you're excited because at least you know that there's something going on, right? Like it's just all
Yep.
this challenging. At least there's a reason why these things have been going on. But I'm sure at that point, which is very similar to me, you don't even know what it means. Like you're like, oh, I have this thing, it's fine, I have surgery, I'm going to be fine. But what happened after that? So you have it. Did you go like on the internet and try and research into it? Did your doctor say like I mean, again, like you said, they didn't know much about it, but was there any
It was
like correlation, like your bowel issues are related to this, your hormone, right? It was like, you
no.
have this
This is
disease.
the problem, right? Like
Yeah.
there's not, at this point it's like you have this disease for the ruptured cyst, and she explained like what it
Yes.
is. Like the lining is growing outside, and then we do ablation. I
Right.
didn't know I knew
Of
nothing back.
course.
And
Of
of
course.
course, here's the thing, I Googled it. There was like nothing out there, like
Yeah.
minus the definition of
Yeah.
it. That's it. Like I had no idea how much it was going to impact like the full body disease part. Like
Yes.
it's,
Yes.
we'll talk about it, but it's going to take me 10 years to
Yeah.
come to that conclusion.
Yes.
So like I have the diagnosis.
Yeah.
I don't have the tools,
Right.
and I don't really have any solutions at this
Yeah.
point.
Right.
Because we do the ablation. She says I have it. At that point, we're not talking stage 1, 2, like none of that.
No. Right.
2 months later, I'm in even more pain, like the scar tissue from the ablation.
Yeah.
So she says she's a great OBGYN. I can't but it's not her
Of
specialty. And she just
course.
kind of says, I don't know what else to do for you at this point.
Yeah.
Like minus
Right.
the meds, the birth control, which like most of the people you probably talk to, we go through all the birth controls.
Yeah.
We try the Depo shot. I remember being in a college class, and I just burst into tears in my class for no reason. And I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
I have to get up and leave. And I just got real depressed. And I said, that's it. From then on, I was like, you will never put another shot into this body
Yeah.
because there's no undoing it quick enough for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I'll take
Right.
birth control pills, I'll switch them. Shots are
Uh,
off the table.
and in this time, like you're taking birth control, do you feel you say your pain's worse after the surgery? Does the birth control help at all? Are you feeling, you went back to school, you feeling a little bit better? Or is it just like, this is my life, this is how I live now? Yeah.
This is my life. And the example of that, so I knew I wasn't going back to a college away from home because of how sick I was.
Yeah.
My depression was really bad. I needed constant supervision, to be honest. Like we got me on meds, like, antidepressant meds, which helped.
Mm-hmm.
But there would still be times where I would like call my mom, like up to my room and be like, we're having a day, a bad
Yeah.
one. Could you sit
Yeah.
with me? And I knew at that point, like, I wasn't going out to college again. And that was
Yeah.
okay. I went to community school. But my pain was so bad that I had to map out a route. First of all, I only went to a college that was 20 minutes away because I couldn't drive that far because of the stomach pain. And I had to know exactly where the bathrooms were. Like there were portions of the drive where it was like 10 minutes, there's no bathroom. And I would have full blown panic attacks. I
Yeah.
actually stopped at the ShopRite grocery store almost every day of my life. because I would just like, the stress would make it worse.
Yes,
And then
of
I would
course.
have to go to the bathroom.
Right. It's like a vicious, you're having
And I was,
anxiety about the situation that then causes you. I get it. I've been in the same,
yeah,
it still happens to me this day, just so you know. Like,
yes. And, like the pain, I mean, there were times that the pain was so bad, I would pray I would black out. Like, I would actually have rather blacked out than be in that moment, like literally keeled over,
yeah.
like internally screaming if I was out in public. If I
Yeah.
was at home, I was out loud screaming at
Yeah.
times. And it was just nothing
Could do.
I just didn't, and I didn't know it was endo. This is the worst part. It has nothing to do with endo in my mind.
You think I have some sort of stomach yeah. This is your story is so like there's different parts, but so similar to me because that was my
Yeah.
path. I went to all the GI doctors and did all the GI tests. And so you're kind of living with this situation. You're taking birth control.
Yep.
You're on some different medications. What's like the next thing that
Yeah.
happens that
So
kind
this
of
was like
triggers another step, right?
2001 to 2008. This goes on like a good 7 to 8 years, I want to say. And it's like you said, I go to every specialist. I go to urologist. I go to um, why can't I think of it? The stomach doctor, gastroenterologist.
GI,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I remember sitting there and thinking, why am I the only person under 20 in these rooms? Like, what is wrong with me? Like,
Yeah.
why is this my life? And no answers. I have colonoscopies, I have endoscopies, I have cystoscopies, which that one actually did come back with the IC diagnosis. So interstitial cystis, which is always a tongue twist for
Yes.
me.
Yes.
I had really bad bladder pain. I had constant UTIs and constant yeast infections, like all throughout college,
Yeah.
just nonstop. So when I finally got the IC diagnosis, that actually helped a little with the bladder stuff. They
Yeah.
put me on a medication to sort of coat the lining of my bladder,
Mm-hmm.
which did actually calm down a lot of the spasming, the
Good.
frequency.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, the IC sort of became a background like portion of it.
Right. Because you were kind of like
Um,
had a little bit of a solution for that.
like
Yeah.
some of the like low acidity drinks.
Sure.
I'll be honest, I should have given up coffee way back when, but I'm in my 20s. I'm like, you can't have coffee. No, thank you. I don't believe in diet changes at this point. I fought that for a very long time with endo. So I could have done a little bit more, but so that kind of happens. And then I did have one more surgery in between in those 7 years. I don't even remember the doctor's name. All I remember is going and he was a supposed specialist. Um, I woke up during the surgery,
Oh my
number one.
gosh. That's my worst
Uh,
nightmare, by the way.
yeah,
That is terrifying.
it is terrifying to wake up. They got me back under immediately, but it was enough to leave that like
Yeah. Yeah.
PTSD.
Panic.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I remember coming out of it and hearing them say, like, we found nothing. She doesn't have endo. And I was devastated because I knew I had endo.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what? You're wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Good. I mean, that's
but it also put me off of doctors for a little while, not gonna
sure.
lie.
Yeah.
We're having a lot of failures on like all fronts. Like no one's giving me answers. And so I'm just like frustrated. So I think at some point I'm just like, this is life.
Yeah.
I'm still having pelvic pain, period pain, obviously all that. So in 2008, I wanted to organize a fundraiser. I'm working now at this point. I'm working full time in New Jersey. And I wanted to do some sort of fundraiser for endo. So I end up raising money at work and doing this walk for endometriosis. It was like the cutest little thing, super small, like 30 people show up.
But
But, my family
incredible.
came. Yeah.
Incredible.
Like, again, we're still not really talking about it
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
much, And so it's really like this event to connect with other people.
Yeah.
And I meet this one woman, her daughter has endometriosis and is not even there. She's not well enough to be there that
To
day,
come to the walk. Yeah.
but her mom's there. And she is the first person that tells me about excision surgery. And she tells me about this specialist in New York. And I'm like, wow, like, is this like, is this it? Is there a solution? Like, she was
Yeah.
like, my daughter literally could not get out of bed and she had the surgery and like she does much better now. She still has issues, but like
But she's a
way
lot
better.
better. Yeah.
And so I'm like, great, like I'm gonna go find out about this.
Yeah.
I think I've been working for like 2 or 3 years at this point, and I go and I have insurance, and you know, the news comes, yeah, we could help you, but we don't accept insurance.
Of course.
Um,
It's
it's a
so fun
10,000.
in your 20s when
Uh,
you have zero money because you're in your 20s and you're not supposed to have
and
money.
I have like all this student debt.
Student debt, yeah.
I'm not making as much as my salary is less than my student debt at this
Oh
point,
yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
And I'm lucky, like I live at home. Like I'm saving money the best I
Right,
can. Like
right.
I have like I have to say my family, my parents and my brother like got me through so many of those years. Like
Yeah,
would not have survived without them. And my parents obviously gave me a place to live and like helped
yeah.
me through all this, right? So but
Supported
then like
you, like
this
mentally,
yeah,
physically,
all of it.
financially, all of it. They sound
I feel
incredible.
terrible when I speak to like those out there with endo who don't have the support. I mean, it crushes me
Yeah.
like internally because I'm like, I don't think I could have done this without my family.
Because so many people just, because the lack of awareness, I talk about this all the time. So people just don't understand it. If I came to you and said, I have diabetes, I need to go eat
Mm-hmm.
something right now, you would understand it because you
Right.
have the awareness of what diabetes is. And I do think it's better now. But if I can, a lot of people who don't have support, their families think they're making it up. And I
Yeah.
don't fault the family. It's because, well, the family should be more empathetic, but it's just
It's unknown.
the unknown, the lack of awareness, hence why I do this show, is the root cause. There's no research, there's more research now, but just that is what will change everything. And that's what we're
Yeah.
here doing.
Right.
So, okay. So you find out about the surgery. It's crazy expensive. What do you do?
So they say like it's 10K up front. Like you got to pay that. I mean, I have a nervous breakdown, like
Yeah.
full blown,
Yeah.
forget it. We're done. Nope. It's off the table. Like
Yeah.
10K, like I understand that like it's your health, but you're just like, I don't have 10K.
Right.
Like, where am I going to get that money from? And I was like, we're done with this. It's off the table. It's just not
Yeah.
happening because it just seemed impossible. And I was just so overwhelmed. And, I ended up talking to my parents, and my parents are like, listen, we'll come up with the money. Like, this is important. Like, and I ended up talking to my manager at work. She's like, I will loan you the money. And I'm
Oh
like,
my
stop
God.
it.
I'm going to
Stop
cry.
it.
That's
Yeah.
wow.
And I was like, no. Like, and she was like, Jen, this is your life. Like, because at this point, I've asked for a special. They tried to move me to like open seating at work, and I had a cry. Like, I cried and had a breakdown. I was like, I think I have to quit. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I can't sit out on an open floor because I had a cubicle, and I was like, you don't understand. I'm keeled over in pain a good majority of the day, and it's okay because I can hide it.
Right.
But I can't be seen. And they were like, well, of course we're not going to let you quit over that. Like, we'll get you a place where you can be comfortable.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, thank God. Like, cause I just wasn't in
That's
emotionally
also
dealing with a lot
incredible.
of it.
That's
Yeah,
incredible. And there's so much that we could dive into with
I
just
know.
the workplace and support. That's like a
Yeah.
whole nother podcast, but
I got really lucky.
how incredible, like how wonderful. Okay. So
So basically everyone convinces me to do it. So we come up with the money. I had the surgery, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 endo. And he found it everywhere. I mean, rectal, bladder, uterus outside, abdominal cavity, all over. And he cuts it all out and says, because it's stage 4, unfortunately, there's a good chance it's going to come back, right? Like you'll probably be good. Like I think he said I have a 5-year success rate before people return. And I felt great for the first time in my life. Recovery was hard, but once I got past that, I was like a new person. Like, what is this?
yeah.
My stomach, but the stomach pain went away. Like, it was on my bowels.
At that point, after that surgery, did it all click? Like, oh my goodness, all of this has been related since I was 16.
Yeah. It was like 50 light bulbs went off in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then I think I was angry because I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me this?
Because everybody in the medical community, it's like everybody treats you in a silo, and it's like, no, in this disease, like you said, is a full body disease. So yeah.
And it was it was good and frustrating because it had been stomach was separate, bladder was separate. And like all of a sudden these things, to your point, like all have gone away. So I felt like really, really good for the most part. I think like 2 or 3 years into that, all of a sudden I got really bloated one day. And then I couldn't eat more than like a couple of ounces in a sitting. Like the
Mhm.
pain was so bad. And I was like 6 months bloated, like
Yeah.
7 months bloated, like taking these pictures. And I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And because I'm not eating, I start dropping a pound a week at this point. So for 3 months, I'm still in New Jersey. I am going to every doctor possible. My regular doctor. You're constipated. Take an enema. Again, regular doctor. No, there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. Gastro number one. There's nothing wrong with you. You're constipated. Okay, people, like, what am I not saying? Why is this not? I'm not eating. Like, I physically cannot eat
Yeah.
more than like 2 bites in a sitting because it's so painful. I finally find a doctor who's like, you could have this thing called SIBO. And I'm like, where do you guys come up with this stuff? Like, why do you keep giving me conditions I've never heard of? Like, what is
Right.
SIBO?
Yeah.
So I go and I do research and I learn more about SIBO, and it's like basically small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So like your bacteria is producing too much, which is producing a lot of gas, a lot of bloating. They say like go do this FODMAP diet.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've already been given diets for endo,
Yeah.
IC. I'm a real like anti-diet person. I try it, but I don't really give it long enough because again, I'm just real stubborn about the diet thing at this point in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you want me to eat? Like you're taking away all my foods. Like,
Right.
no, I'm not gonna do that. It took like 3 or 4 weeks just to get scheduled for the test, which is a hydrogen breath test. I get the test and they confirm it's SIBO. Again, I'm excited.
Right. Because you have an answer.
There's a there's an answer.
Yeah.
My husband's like, I don't know if you should be excited. This is a lifelong condition with no cure. And I'm like, well, that's just the theme of my life. So like,
You're like, just add it on. Just add it to the list.
I'm like, that's just what it is. Like, but at least now maybe there's answers.
Right. Or
Maybe there's something we,
solutions, or maybe there's
yeah,
something, maybe not a diet, but one major thing you can cut out. Right. Like,
right. Maybe there's some incremental changes I can make,
sure,
which
of
I
course.
understood then was sugar. For me, it was sugar. And so that I was actually able to change. And then they had an antibiotic that had just been, I think, on the market, Xifaxan, which also helped. But it comes with a warning of like, yes, you can use it, which I used it at that time because it was so bad. I had to do something like
Yeah.
to reset all of like that. But it also was like, you're going to have flare ups and you can't keep using this antibiotic. Like with any antibiotic, you have to be really careful.
Yeah. You have to stop it at some point because it just becomes ineffective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it took me, I'll be honest, like it took me a while. I still obviously have SIBO now. I'm a lot smarter about how I treat it, and it's way more anti-inflammatory. It is the diet. It is, you know, coffee and alcohol and, all the
Yeah.
things, wine that I never wanted to give up. Like I've learned the signs of a flare up to get it under control long before it becomes like to that point where I can't eat and I'm like losing weight from it.
So if people are listening and they think they might have this, what are some of the, like, when you say flare up or indicators, are they
Yeah.
similar to endo, or is there something different that people can look for in case they think they may have this?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that different. So one thing for me was actually not very ladylike, belching. So I never had belching with endo. We actually thought I started belching after my surgery that went well a lot.
Yeah.
Like and it turns out my endo symptoms were covering up the SIBO. So it wasn't known, but because the endo was gone, it, I guess, gave the SIBO like all this room to be like, hey, I'm here.
Here
And
I
so like I
am.
had this constant burping. And if I ate like a food that was triggering,
Yeah.
I mean, I could be up for hours at night, like just like, and it was like it's not even just burping,
It
it's
wasn't
like
like a burp. It's
pain.
like, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you feel like there's something like in you that like this buildup of gas, which I never really associated. Like the bloating is an endo part. Like,
Sure.
we all get the bloating, but the gas and like that, it's more like upper, what I would say.
Got it. Got it. Right. Not like
And
it's like more in the mid, like where your
yeah,
stomach
like
is.
it's coming up to your like diaphragm almost, like you can
Yes.
feel it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would say, which is a really telltale sign, which I can go by now, is sugar cravings. So because of the way the bacteria works with SIBO, it wants more sugar to feed the
feed
bad
the,
bacteria that's over.
yeah,
So you actually end up craving sugar a lot more, but the more sugar you give it, the
the
worse it
worst.
gets.
Yeah.
So and I'm not a so this is might be hard for someone who's a sweet. I'm not a sweet tooth person. I'm a
Right.
savory person. So for me to crave sugar is usually like a really quick
Rare.
sign
Hmm.
to be like, hey Jen, like something's probably happening again because like all I want is sugar. Like where's the candy? Where's the stuff? And like I don't eat that stuff normally.
Normally, yeah.
If you're a sweet tooth, it might be a little harder.
Little harder, yeah. But I think those are good indicators, and definitely the belching, because I feel like
Yeah,
that is not a normal like endo
normal.
symptom, or
Yeah.
normal like in day to day. So how, and right now, are you mostly just, you've adjusted kind of the acidic
Yep.
things in your diet, and that's how you
Yeah.
maintain it?
It took me, like I said, it like that was, I mean, I knew probably in like 2013. It's taken me years to
Yeah,
find the right, like I did actually use the antibiotics as a crutch every night. Like I
sure.
would be fine for a year and then do it. I don't ever take them now because I've sort of just changed my mental view on like how to treat a lot of these conditions. I really try more natural methods now because I just realized like this is a lifelong journey.
I think that's a common theme though with a lot of people that I interview and talk to on the show, and myself personally. Like, I've started with a lot of the medications, but then when I realized like this is something I have to do constantly, I
Mhm.
just feel more comfortable going the natural route. I just,
Yeah.
because like you said, it's forever. So like I
And what
just
are you
don't,
doing to your body?
yeah, I don't want to be on something for, I mean, I have Hashimoto, so I do have to take a thyroid pill, but I
Yep.
take Armor Thyroid, which is a more like supposedly more natural version, but it's a prescription. But I didn't want to go like my sister did the Synthroid, and then she had to switch. So like she just had these like roller coasters, and I was like, I've
Yeah.
already lived that life with birth control and other medications. Like, I do feel like a lot of us get to that spot where like, how can I like more naturally treat this, because it's forever.
Right.
Yeah,
And like you want to be like, I don't want to always have to put these meds into my body. So
right, exactly. Okay,
I do have it
so
like under control. So that's good.
good, good. So now what happens next? I mean,
So
things get a
things are
little
good for a while.
haywire. Yeah, things are
Things
good.
are good. So then we moved to Colorado in
Right.
2016.
And
So
everything's so
life seems
chill. You
good.
slow
Yeah.
down. You're hiking every
Oh my
day.
God. Like I love it. I'm becoming like more physically fit than I've ever been. But at the same time, I can feel in the background that something's wrong.
Yeah,
The hormones start coming back up again. And I'm like, I thought I got this under control.
right.
So I think, I put it off, which is just typical of me. I did it again this year, but I'm like, I don't want it to be endo. So I'm going to pretend it's not for a while. And the symptoms just start getting worse and worse. The cramps, the stomach pain, the hormones. So by 2017, I know I have to do something. So we're living in Colorado, but we still have family in New Jersey. So the logical choice is to go back to the same excision surgeon I had in New York, which by the way, he operates out of New York, or his office is in New York, but he does the surgery in Connecticut, in Greenwich,
Okay.
Connecticut.
Okay.
So kind of sucked because the first time we had to drive to, like, we
Sure.
stayed overnight, got up at 5 a.m. to go to surgery, but then did like the 2 hour drive home, which is miserable after you've just had your insides cut apart.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So we scheduled the surgery for November of 2017. And this is important to me because I always wonder what would have happened if I had the surgery on that date. Um, we got the cost last minute again. And again, I was prepared, but this time when we went through the insurance, it turns out my insurance was really bad coverage and was only willing to cover the Medicare rate. So I was going to get virtually nothing back out of, like, I think it was like 12,000 or 14,000 this time down. And I was going to get like 1,000 back. So like, again, I just panic, and my husband luckily steps in. We were right in an enrollment for benefits at the time at both of our companies. We
Hmm.
both worked in the corporate world, and we realized his insurance is far better. So we dropped my insurance for 2018 and go on his plan. However, what this means is I cannot have the surgery in November 2017. I have to bump
To
it to
wait.
2018
Yeah.
for the insurance to kick in.
To
So it
kick
gets
in.
moved to January. Um, so we go back for the surgery in January. We do the whole thing, go to Connecticut, have the surgery. Um, the surgery goes fine. And I guess I don't, you probably like, what with excision, I'm always thinking in my head, like, what if they cut something? What if there's bleeding? Like those are the known risks to me of the surgery. Like there's all
Sure.
these things they tell you that
Right.
you're like worried about. So when you wake up from surgery and they're like, everything's fine,
Yeah.
it went well. It was stage 2 on the cusp of stage 3 endo. So it had come back a
Sure.
decent amount in
Yeah.
8 years. He gets it all out again. Okay, you go home. I go back to my in-laws. I'm recovering. And as everyone always talks about, probably like the gas pain is the worst, and you have shoulder pain, and it's really painful. It's hard to explain to someone until they experience it,
Yeah.
what it feels like.
Yeah. It just, the craziest pain you get in your shoulder that makes zero sense
Yeah,
because they operated in your abdomen.
right.
But yeah.
So the first night, I'm awake all night because they give you the hydrocodone, and I take it because I'm in pain, but it always keeps me up.
Yeah.
So I'm awake and sitting up all night and looking at like straightforward. And then the next day, it's like 24 hours almost to like the like direct. I get really bad right side neck pain, like right in here, to the point where I can't turn my head. Like that's how bad. Like turning my head is excruciating pain. And I'm like, this is weird, right? But I'm thinking maybe because I didn't sleep and like I
There's
sat
a
up.
kink in your neck. Of course.
So
Of
that's
course.
what we think. The weirder part is I'm still taking hydrocodone and it's not helping. Like nothing is helping with this pain. So we go another 24 hours. And then Saturday night was when everything changed. The neck pain is still really bad, but I'm still thinking it's kinked. Okay, no big deal. I go to sleep that night and I've never experienced it since, like an explosion in my head every time I move. Like I don't know how to explain it. It's literally like the pain in my head is nothing I've experienced. Like every time I move, it's just like to the point where I have to hold my head. Like I'm laying there holding my head to like stop it from like shooting pain out.
Yeah.
And this goes on all night.
Oh my goodness.
And here's the problem with head pain. You're not thinking clearly. So you're
For sure.
trying to push through it, and I just don't sleep. I just do this all night. So by the time I get up the next morning, um, because of circumstances, my husband had gone somewhere and my parents had gone somewhere. We had another family thing going on. I call everyone in the morning. I'm like, I don't know what to do. My in-laws are there,
Yeah.
but I just like am panicked and I need to talk to someone. And my dad's like, let's call the doctor. So we call twice, takes a while. He calls me back. I'm real disappointed because he's like, it's the gas pain. And I'm like, well, I've done this 3 times. Like,
Yeah.
well, actually 4 times.
In my
It's not
head.
the gas pain.
Like it's
Like,
in my
it's
head.
the shoulder. I know the pain.
Yeah.
This is shooting up my neck into my head. This is not that. So he's like, fine, go to the ER. But he doesn't really seem to care.
Yeah.
So I go to the ER and I get really unlucky. I get a really nasty, cranky ER doctor. And my husband's with me at this point. My mother-in-law is with me, and my husband's saying, just make it up and tell, because he had the weird part is his manager had gone through a similar issue, and he's like, tell them your arm is numb. And I was like, I'm not gonna lie. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have to lie to get
Right.
medical care.
Right.
And that's how I feel about it. And he's like, well, we need a test. And like, she's not taking you seriously. And I'm like, I can't do it. And I'm also, again, I'm in a really bad headspace. I haven't slept. I'm in
Sure.
excruciating pain.
You're
Nothing is clear.
recovering from excision surgery. Like, yeah.
Nothing is like
I
straight in my head.
no, of course. How could it be?
And she's like, I talked to your doctor, and I am pissed at this point because I don't know what goes on in that conversation, but she says, I talked to him and we're just going to give you like some muscle relaxers. And I'm like, what did you just talk about? Like, this is again going back to where I felt like he kind of blew me off. And now I'm wondering, like, is he just saying, like, just make her,
Right.
just
Just
sort
like
of like,
she's fine. Yeah.
just tell her it's fine, like, give her some meds. And we're like, we want a CT scan. And she's like, no, you don't need a CT scan. And so we're like, well, we want one. And she's like, fine, but I'm going to put it as against doctor's orders and wishes and recommendations. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And she's like, well, your insurance probably won't cover it. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh. Come
oh my God,
on. Come
I just
on.
spent $12,000 on surgery. Like, I've seen the hospital bills. Like, I'm like, this is going to be $4,000 or $5,000. And I have like a full blown panic. Like, I just don't know
Sure.
what to do. And I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. And by the way, we tell them I'm getting on a plane the next day. Is that safe? I'm flying back to Colorado because this is a concern. She refuses. I get really frustrated. We don't know what to do. And we end up just saying, I probably was more of like pushing. I was like, you know what, just get me out of
Like,
here.
yeah.
I'm done.
Yep.
I'm just so frustrated. I want to be out of here. So we leave. The next day, by the way, my surgeon the next day, I canceled going to the city. I'm like, I'm not coming to the city. I'm just going to fly home. And he's like, well, I want to show you the pictures. Like, you're not going to understand unless you come in. I'm like, okay, well, that's not my problem right now. Like,
Yeah. I just want to get out
and
of
the
here.
fact that that's your concern is more concerning to me.
Email them
Like,
to me.
now
Like
I'm
I
just
would have been
mad.
like, email them to me. Like mail them. I don't
What, who
care.
cares? Like,
Yeah.
I know you did a good job. Like, whatever. Like, I have a problem.
Yeah.
I just want to get home. And so I remember getting ready to get on the plane. I'm in a wheelchair and I had the worst feeling I've ever had in my life, like gut feeling. I'm like, something is wrong. And I said, like, something's wrong, but I get on the plane anyway and I fly home. And I sleep for like the next 3 days, pretty much nonstop. And my neck pain is still there, but it's like a little bit better. And then finally, like on Thursday, I'm like, oh, I kind of feel better, like surgery wise,
Mm-hmm.
but the neck pain's still there. So I make an appointment with my regular doctor for like 2 days later. That Thursday, I start feeling not good again at night. Like the head pain comes back, but I go to bed. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I can't feel my right arm. And now I'm panicking and I'm like, something okay. And then I realize I can't feel my right leg. And so it's probably been like 20 minutes of me trying. Like, it's kind of like when it goes to sleep, like you know it's there, but you really can't feel it too.
Right. Right.
So finally I wake up my husband. He's like, get up, we're going to the hospital. And I'm like, that seems like, oh, like
Ridiculous.
unnecessary.
Like,
Like,
right. No big deal. Like, yeah.
I probably have like a pinched nerve or something. And he's like, get up. Like, we're going to the hospital. I'm like, Chris, it's like 5 a.m. We can't go to the hospital now. And he's like, seriously, I'm not going to say it again. Get up. Like, so we get up, we leave, we go to the hospital. They get me right into a room and they do like a quick test, which I now know, like if anyone ever tells you to close your eyes and go like this, it is a stroke test, which we could talk about, but I have no idea. So she leaves the room and like maybe 60 seconds later, a nurse comes back in and says, I don't want you to panic. And I'm like, okay, well, anytime you start with that sentence,
Yeah.
I'm
Come
panicking.
on. Yeah.
Just so you know.
I'm in
And
an
he's
ER. Don't panic.
like, don't panic,
Just
but we have
deliver the
to, yeah.
news. Just deliver it. Like,
He's like, we have to move you to a bigger room because we're concerned you're having a stroke. And at that moment, over the loudspeaker, a stroke alert goes off and they start paging teams to the ER. Now, thank God this hospital is phenomenal. And I'm like, is that for me? And yes, it is. And what happens next is absolute chaos. They rush in, they get me like, they have people that come that are part of a stroke team that now are with you like nonstop. There is a robot computer following you because you're going to talk to a neurologist and you're being raced to CT. So forget about getting to the bigger room. Like, this is like, we're being
triage.
paged.
You're like an emergency triage situation.
The amount, like, that's like alarms and things that are being said. I mean, I'm holding my breath. I'm not breathing at this point.
No, for sure.
Don't know what my husband's not breathing at this point, obviously, either. We get raced to CT. They do a CT scan. They bring me back to this bigger room, which is like the sterile room. And you're just like, what is happening? And my husband's like, I have to go to the bathroom real quick. He literally steps away for like 60 seconds. You know, normally in the hospital, it takes forever for doctors to come back.
Of course.
The doctor is back in the room while he's gone for 60 seconds.
Course.
And she's like, okay, you have a vertebral artery dissection.
And you were like, and excuse me, what?
Yeah, which we actually knew about because this is what my husband's boss had just had a few months earlier. So it's actually something we've heard of, but the odds of it are very, very low. It is like super uncommon, and most people get it from chiropractor work, adjusting of the neck, not from surgery. But the theory is that while I was under and your body doesn't know to like push back, someone turned my head too far. And what that means is like the artery running up here actually ripped. So the artery is made up of like, they explain, like, think of it as like wallpaper on your artery on the inside. The wallpaper has just ripped from the inside.
Oh my gosh.
So there's now a pseudoaneurysm, which is like basically a pool of blood. And this space within the wallpaper and the outside of the artery that is open. And because of that, your body thinks it's a cut and it needs to clot.
It's trying to, yes.
But your vertebral artery only goes one way, which is to your brain. So a blood clot immediately dislodges and goes into my brain.
Yeah.
Hence the stroke.
My goodness.
So I pretty much black out at this point.
Yeah.
Like they decide to immediately put me on blood thinners. That's that's it. That's the only thing. So you're being told there's most likely a blood clot in your brain, but all they can do is give you blood thinners to stop any more clotting and watch and wait and admit you. And I actually take that news okay, and then they're like, and we have to do an MRI, and I burst into tears. And like this is what my husband comes back to is me, and I'm like, I have to go to MRI, and he's like, okay, but what's happening?
Right. He's like, what's it? You're
And I'm
crying. I don't understand.
like, I'm claustrophobic. I can't go in the MRI. Like, what are we gonna do? And they're like, we'll give you something for that. That's
Right.
not really,
Right.
but
So
for
like,
me,
yeah.
I fixate on that. It was something to like
To like have a,
kind of
right. Because it was so much at one moment. I can't
I
even
couldn't feel.
imagine. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I guess I'm lucky in the sense that like there was very little damage that was done. There was no damage that showed up on the MRI. Like I had weakness on my right side. The damage was more to my head in general. So for the next 4 years, I had just I mean, it was nonstop, like just constant, like migraines, different spells, just
Dizzy
it just
probably. And
like yeah, there was 6 months in, like there was like a week where I was dizzy and I couldn't drive.
yeah.
Um, there was another week where the pain was so bad that I was just hysterical and I called my mom and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I give up. Like, I don't know what to do. I went to the ER twice that week until someone finally found enough meds to make it stop,
Stop. Yeah. How long
which
were
was a
you in the
really
hospital when they discovered that you
two
had this
nights,
stroke?
3 days.
Yeah.
So not too long because
Yeah.
luckily, like I said, like they do all the tests. Like I didn't need
Right.
occupational or physical therapy. So they were able to send me home. This is only a week after surgery. So I'm also recovering from
Yeah.
surgery.
I can't, yeah, which you're not even thinking about, I'm sure, because you're concerned about this whole situation. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I think for me, it was the next 2 years were pretty bad.
Yeah. That was
The surgery,
massive, massive trauma.
yeah,
Massive.
like PTSD, I spent a
Yeah.
long time going to therapy, just
Yeah.
recovering. Like I
Yeah.
really did. Your brain, which I learned, like when trauma happens, your brain quickly says like I'm not processing and throws it. So like when they were telling me all this information, I was not processing it. Like
No.
it took me probably close to 2 years to even be able to go back to process it.
Yeah.
Like there was talk about like should we sue, should we do this, and I remember being like I don't care, I want to, I can't even relive the experience.
Yeah. You can't even
Like
think at that point. That's like, you can't even think about that. The
no,
only thing you can do when you go through something that huge is like one day at a time. What am I doing
exactly.
to feel well? Like, I just need to get through this one day. Like big picture things, I'm sure
Yep.
that's how you felt. Like, I can't even deal with that right now. Like,
No.
do I have a glass of water? Like, that's
Right.
how you have to just narrow it and just be like, your basic needs, like
Yeah.
water, shelter, food, like this is
Yeah.
all I can, for real. Like, that's when you go through something,
That was
that's
it.
all, and that's all you should focus on. And like, for
Yeah.
people who are listening, big surgeries like this, and when things like this happen, you have to just narrow your focus, because it's too
Yep.
much. It's too
It is
much.
too much. And like thinking too far ahead, I would get so upset because like I couldn't do, I guess I underestimated, like they were like you can't ski. Like for some reason I was like, can I go skiing? It's the middle of ski. And they were like, no, you're not skiing. You're like, the way they answered was like, why is she even asking that? But for me, it seemed like normal.
Yeah,
I guess I underestimated how much what had happened was going to impact my body.
for sure. And how serious,
Like,
again, that goes back to, you weren't like, this was really serious, but it was probably very hard for you to process at that time.
exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking it's not. So I remember getting home and um, you realize quickly, like taking a shower requires like a 2 hour nap.
Yeah.
Um, I remember one day I tried to like wipe something down on the fridge and I literally ended up on the floor because I felt so sick from doing it. Like,
Yeah.
so it really was one, like, it was to the point where it was like, wake up and open your eyes and think, is my head pounding? Like, that was like
Yeah.
opening my eyes at the beginning of the day was like almost like terrifying because the pain was so bad at
Yeah.
some points that like, you're just like, all I can do is just get through this moment.
Yeah.
And I went back to work. within 2 weeks of all of this. Like, I was starting a new job. So I
Oh
just
my
kind of just
goodness.
went to it. I've really, really gotten lucky that I've worked with like amazing managers and people who have let me work from home, who have
Right.
let me take sick days, who have understood all of this. So I think one thing I will get into is like maybe stroke awareness, which I was put on blood thinners. I was kept on blood thinners. The hope was that we were told there was 3 situations. Your artery completely heals, that's best case, like meaning that hole
Mhm.
closes. Your artery can actually close itself off. Like, basically, you can lose an artery, your body will actually disconnect it and say, I'm just using the left side.
It'll figure it out. Yeah.
You can survive, that's totally fine. Obviously, you're at a risk then if something happens to the left artery,
Sure.
but again, they were like, that's not worst case because you don't worry about the clotting again because that artery is no longer in use.
Yeah.
The very worst case scenario was it would partially heal, which they were like, we do a 3 month scan, a 6 month scan, and a 12-month. Of course, I go for my 3 month, and it's made no progress whatsoever. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty low, but like they're
Yeah.
like, you need to go off blood thinners. It's fine. You can go on baby aspirin. So I do. I felt weird about it, but I follow their instructions. And 3 weeks later, I find myself having stroke symptoms again, but this time I know. So my face is drooping. I do like the close your eyes, lift your
Yeah.
hands up. And the whole point is if one arm goes down, you better get to the ER. You can also lay down and lift both feet. Like,
Mhm.
this is another test. Like, there's some really simple tests you can do if you think someone's having a stroke. Like, can you lift both legs? Can you push? Like, can you squeeze? Can you lift
Mhm.
both hands with your eyes closed? Does anything drop? Is your face drooping? And they're really important things to know. I'm a huge advocate of stroke awareness, obviously, now.
Yes.
Um, I was potentially having another blood clot, but they couldn't find any signs of it. But I actually felt worse after the second event. I couldn't. Um, I really had trouble with my right side for months after.
Yeah.
I really had trouble thinking and concentrating. So I went back on blood thinners, which was the problem was it was like it's 50-50. There are risks with blood thinners, and there is the risk you're always going to throw a blood clot, and no one can tell me definitively.
And you
It's
just
my
don't know
it's my
which
call.
way it's going to go. Yeah. Yeah.
And having lived through both of those stroke experiences and the way they made me feel, I was like, I choose the blood thinners
Yeah.
because, to be honest, when the second time happened, I felt worse. I kept thinking like, I don't know if I could do this again. Like, it's a
Mm.
struggle to keep coming back from this. And so it'll be 5 years this January, and I've been on blood thinners ever since.
Wow.
And
And
that,
so do you still get scans often? Like, do
like,
you
usually once a year, nothing's
just
changed. I mean, so
monitor
the
it?
problem was by my 12-month scan, it was the same. And they pretty much said after a year, we don't
It's
expect it to change. You're stuck. It's kind of
right.
just stuck where it is,
Yeah.
which was hard to hear,
Yes.
but I was recovering slowly. I would say it took me like 2 full years to kind of get back to even being like the version of who I was
Yeah.
physically, mentally. Um, and then I guess the really disappointing part was the endo surgery kind of was a fail because not in the sense that he didn't remove it, but being on blood thinners after surgery with a disease that's involving bleeding, not a great outcome. And the stress that my body went under,
Oh, I mean, you didn't even get to heal. I mean,
no.
you had a major surgery and then you were just in fight or flight for a long time afterwards. Your body was, and
Yep.
your mind and your
Yeah.
head. I mean, I'm so
So I really did
so
not reap the
sorry.
benefits from that surgery, which really was kind of disappointing.
Did you call the
Uh,
surgeon and say
oh
like,
yeah,
"Hey,
all
I
the
had a
records.
stroke after,
Mhm.
and I went to the ER, and
Yep. We sent them everything, and they basically did nothing. Um, I think that was harsh. Like,
yeah, well,
we
they can't apologize, right? Because I'm sure that leaves them some sort of liability, but maybe a phone call to like check in on
well,
you,
how are you doing? Like, like,
anything.
and I don't think it wasn't really the surgeon potentially, like most likely it was the anesthesiologist or their team. The
Yeah,
thing is we have no way of knowing what happened that day.
of course.
And I'll never know. All I
No,
know is that I had surgery, I was fine, and within 24 hours, which is pretty much the turnaround time for this. And there was nothing, like the only other thing that would cause this is like I said, manual manipulation, a car accident, like traumatic whipping of the head. And there was nothing. I had just had surgery. I was on bed rest. There
yeah,
was nothing else that could have taken place. So like
right, right.
it had to be the surgery that caused this.
Yeah.
I think it was hard for me because it was, like I said, you go into surgery knowing there are risks. This was never one of them I was prepared
No,
for,
absolutely
like,
not.
ever.
Yeah.
Like, I never saw this coming.
No, why would, I mean, why would you? You would have
Right.
zero reason to think something like this could happen. And I think it brings up such a, valid point. Everybody is very nervous before surgery and they give you all the risks and all the things, but it is, for people listening, it is a big risk. No matter, you
It is
just
major surgery.
you just don't you don't know. And usually, knock on wood, it's all good, right?
Yep.
But it's a huge risk and it's really scary. And I thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm so sorry for what you've been. I mean, it's horrible. It's
It
horrible.
is.
And I mean, we talked earlier, you said you're feeling pretty good. How are you doing, like today? Like now, like
Yeah.
what's current life like? You're still on blood thinners. How's the endo? Like, how's day-to-day life?
Yeah, so I just had my 5th surgery this past August. I went to a new surgeon. I went to the CEC, which I have to say to anyone listening, they are phenomenal. Dr. Sonervo is phenomenal. His team is phenomenal. The Northside Hospital, where I had my surgery, above and beyond, because we now ask for, like, we want to talk to the anesthesiologist. I get put in a neck brace for every procedure I have.
Yeah.
The anesthesiologist rolled me down to the with me to the OR in the neck brace. He came to check on me post recovery.
Wow.
If you're considering, like, obviously I flew across the country for this, but they were well
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
I chose to do a hysterectomy for adenomyosis. You probably can say it better, but I
Adenomyosis.
cannot
I know
I
it is so
cannot say
hard.
it.
Just
I
say
cannot say it.
just say
Adeno.
adeno, like endo, adeno,
Yes.
great,
I did not. Yeah,
adeno,
no.
maybe it's adenos.
Yeah. I chose to have my uterus, my tubes removed. I left my ovaries. Obviously, I'm still under 40. Um, I feel phenomenal, like,
Good.
best I've felt in a long time. I still get bruises all over from the blood thinners, drives me nuts,
Yeah,
but, like, that's pretty much the worst of it right now.
good.
The CEC, like, my whole experience there, it was terrifying to go back to surgery, obviously, like, after
Yes,
this.
yes.
And they were so amazing. Like, they knew my story, they knew it, they made me so comfortable. I could not be more grateful. Everything went according to plan. I recovered way faster than I ever expected, considering we threw in the hysterectomy.
Right.
Um, and it was more complicated than, past surgeries. And I guess I would just say, like, my story is unique. It is not normal. So I don't want to scare anyone from having surgery. I've had surgery 5 times.
Right.
Obviously, this only happened once. And
Right.
the odds are so, I want to say it's like, I don't know, 1 in 100,000.
Yeah.
Um, like, really, really low to have this happen regardless. Like, just to have a vertebral artery dissection is super low. Having it from surgery is super uncommon. People are still amazed. But yeah, I feel good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I appreciate you saying that because, right, you don't want to scare people, but it's also, it's your story and it needs to be shared and it needs to be talked about as what you've gone through. But I'm so grateful to hear that you are feeling better. I mean, that's the most important thing. So as we kind of wrap up, is there any advice or things that have really worked well for you that you want to share, or anything we didn't talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think the number one lesson I learned is, like, trust your gut. I think you have to do that with this disease in general, but
Yeah.
really, like, advocate for yourself. It's not easy. Like, it's hard, and you feel like there are times, like, I guess one thing I would say is, if you ever walk into a doctor's office and you leave more confused than when you got there, maybe that's not the right doctor. Like,
Yeah.
because I've been in both situations, and I think I've learned to really kind of, like, say, maybe that's push these doctors aside, or maybe that's not the right doctor. Maybe they're not taking me, like, seriously. And, like, at this point in my life, I would like to say I take no crap. If you give me a bad feeling in 30 seconds, we're done. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not coming back. And, like, that's okay. And I think that everyone needs to know that doctors are not always the smartest people in the room. Maybe they know something, but it's not your situation.
Right. You
Or
know
maybe they're not
yourself.
listening to you.
You know your
Exactly.
body, you know yourself, you know what you've been through.
Right. Like, trust your gut. And if you don't know, like, I went to the hospital probably twice a year after my initial event, because I would have these things and I'm like, I'm having a stroke again. And you know what they told me at the hospital? Just come in. If you're that concerned, even if it's okay, just come in and get the scan, get the MRI, because you should be more cautious, like live on the side of caution. And so I would just say that to everyone, like, I'm mad at myself for leaving the ER that first time. I should have fought back more. And it's hard, or maybe make sure like you educate your loved ones, because sometimes they have to advocate for you a little harder because
Mhm.
you're not in the right place. But just don't give up on that. I think that's really important to like know yourself and trust yourself. Like, don't ever let anyone talk you out of something that you know is wrong with you.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to the days where you had a ruptured cyst and you just laid in bed with your parents, like there's
Right.
so many times that I remember being home alone once. I for sure had a cyst rupture and I almost called an Uber to go to the hospital because I couldn't drive because I was, in riding back and forth in pain. And then I was like, no, it'll be fine. So I love that the
Yeah.
ER said that to you because I think for so many years we've been told it's in our head or we're
Right.
fine or we're overreacting and that really does weigh on us. Like it
Oh,
for sure it did for me. And so I just would be like, oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine. But sometimes you're not fine and you need to
no.
go. And even if you go and someone says, no, you're fine, at least you have that peace of mind. You get out of the
Yeah.
spiral of something's wrong, but I'm not going to go. I am going to go. Just go. Just go. And you
Go,
might
just go.
get a terrible ER doctor but
And
you
if you
can
really
get
feel
the
like something's still
tests.
wrong, push
Right.
for a different doctor, like,
Yeah.
I think that's what I learned too, and you're right, like, we've been led to believe we were crazy for a long time. Like, I
Yes.
spent the greater part of this 20-year journey thinking I was out of my mind,
Yes.
and it's hard, like, you're right, like, you can't see it's inside, so, like, just know, like, there are times when I'm in so much pain that I think I'm losing my mind, and then when I feel well again, I'm like, "Nope, just as a reminder, Jen, that was real." That was very real. I start writing it down sometimes too. Like that's
Yes.
helped me. Here's my symptoms today. Like, and then
Track
remind
it.
yourself the next day when
Track.
you feel okay again, be like, nope, that really did happen. Like that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I
But
think the other part of my journey for me is talking, like therapy, talking about it,
yes. Yes.
spreading awareness. You'll feel better.
Mhm. And you have to get that out. What you went through was incredibly traumatic, not only just with the endo, but then to have
Yeah,
that stroke on top of it, like that is like you have to talk through that and work
you
through
do.
that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I so agree on tracking because there'll still be times now where I'll feel really anxious and I'm like, why do I have anxiety? What's wrong with me? And then I'll literally look on my tracking. This
Yeah.
legitimately, it just happened to me last week. I was traveling for work and I was like, I just felt like I couldn't get enough deep breaths. Like I was just like,
Yep.
and then I looked and I was like, oh, this happened to me on the 20th of last month. Oh, and the month. And so I was like, this is hormonal. Like this is
Yep.
cyclical. If I hadn't been tracking it, I would have just spiraled that something was wrong. And oh my gosh. So at least
It
I knew
helps.
it helped give me like the peace of, I still felt anxious, but at least I could look at the data and derive, okay, this is happening around the same time every month.
Exactly. Like phones are great for that, right? Like I tracked all of my
Yeah.
cycle, like symptoms, like that. The phone makes it easy to do that.
Yes.
So yeah. And then maybe the only other last thing I'll throw out there is pelvic floor therapy is a journey I'm on right now learning about. And I would say everyone with endo should probably consider it at some point. I've learned a lot um, in this like ongoing surgery is part of it. And then there's this maintenance factor of like, how do I stay healthy? Food, diet, pelvic floor therapy. It's more than just, excision surgeon.
Yeah. It's something that's ongoing. And I recently started seeing a myotherapist. So it's like myofascial release. It's been incredible because I just have
Yeah.
right hip pain. Like my right hip pain is just, it's really just, it's always there. It's very painful. And he said to me, he said, you're so lucky because I started strength training and it really, really, really helped me
Mhm.
just doing weights and not doing like crazy cardio and going for walks, like walking and just lifting weights has really changed my pain. I still
Yep.
have pain, but he's like, the fact that you are moving, even though sometimes you're in pain, and don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, on the really bad days, you should rest and relax. But even if I do a walk around the block and get the blood flowing, I do feel a reduction in that pain. So
Yeah.
it's just, you're right. It's a day-to-day process that you have to figure out what works for you too. one size fits all,
No.
unfortunately, with this disease, which again, I think is also why it's so hard to treat, to educate, because it manifests so differently in every single person.
Yeah, and I think that they don't always tell you that, and I think that's what I've learned more, like, there's not a diet for all of us. There's
No.
not an exercise program. There's not a pelvic floor therapy, like, thing. Like, every person is different. I kinda wish that that would be more known a little
Yeah.
bit, like, you have to do trial and error, and it's very personalized. Some like, the
Yes.
tools themselves are there, like, maybe it's diet, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's therapy, but, like, you have to figure out, like, very specifically within those tools what's gonna work for you to help.
Yeah. And it's
So,
exhausting. And I like sometimes people have to take a break, and I understand that because you're literally like your own experiment trying to figure out what works
yes.
best for you. But I agree with you that that has been the best way for me too. Just it's been a lot of trial and error, figuring out what works for me. And I know some people who they don't do any special diet and they're fine. And I know some
Right.
people who do only plant-based and they feel better. So it really is very specific to you as an
Yeah.
individual. Jen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing and being
Yeah.
vulnerable with us. I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you chatting and being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Yeah, it's been great talking to you.